Hi. Very good morning, everyone. Absolute pleasure to see the audience here today. I guess if anyone here knows of someone who would love to learn more of low-carbon computer coding, feel free to ask them to drop by our stage. We still have plenty of space. So my name is Ian, and I'm from Singapore. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and today I'll be sharing about one very important topic, that of low-carbon computer coding. And when we think of low-carbon computer coding, we're thinking of how we can decarbonize the future of ESG. How can we decarbonize the digital world itself? So what we're going to talk a bit about today, and I'm trying to compress everything, is we're going to look at Greenie Web, what we do as a company, and we're going to go into digital sustainability and what you can do as an individual. So a bit of ourselves, we have been in the space for 16 years. What started off as a side project in 2009 has since become a full-fledged work that I do with a huge team across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. And what we do is threefold. The first thing that we look at is digital sustainability awareness raising, whereby we talk to corporates, governments, and even educational institutions. And we try to bring that knowledge into the classroom, teaching everyone how they can decarbonize their digital activities. The second thing we do is as a consultancy, a boutique consultancy in the digital sustainability space. And the last thing that we do, of course, is Green AI, whereby we change what is called as regular computer code into low carbon computer code. So we create this new type of computer code and we allow corporates, governments, and individuals to use that to greenify their digital lives. So today's session is part of the 30 by 30 program, whereby we're bringing this pro bono into 30 institutions worldwide, right, as part of our own corporate social responsibility. And what we want to do really is to ensure that everyone who wants to learn about this has access to this. We're very pleased to have reached multiple countries over the years, and these are just some pictures of online, offline, and hybrid sessions that we have done. So if you know of any other non-profit or educational institution that could benefit, feel free to reach out to me right after this talk. Okay, so the main content begins now, and I want to kick off today's session with a question, right? So what is digital sustainability, and more importantly, what is a digital carbon footprint? Okay, and because all of us here are still very new to the topic, I'm just going to give you the answer straight away. It's the amount of CO2 we put into the atmosphere each time we use a digital product or service. So each time you send an email, there is CO2 produced. Each time you send a WhatsApp message, there is CO2 produced. Each time you watch a TikTok video, there is CO2 produced. And this is really the backbone of how digital carbon emissions are formed. We call this the DEC nexus. Essentially, it's data, energy, and carbon. And for the DEC nexus, what we talk about is how data eventually leads to energy consumption, and by extension, eventually leads to carbon emission. So at the far left, you see the computer, the handphone, and tablets, and they're representative of things like cloud storage, telecommunication, and complex algorithmic calculations. So all of this consume huge amounts of energy at the server level, thereby leading to carbon footprint at the power plant. So why is this a huge problem? Most people don't know that the amount of carbon we produce from the internet, from our digital world, is as much as every airplane, every airport, every airline combined. And more importantly, it's actually growing at one of the fastest rates of all industries. It's going to triple, a 300% growth by 2040, and that's only in 15 years' time. And that's also being accompanied by a 9% increase in energy consumption per year. In fact, Mozilla Foundation found out that if the internet were a country in itself, the amount of carbon that we produce from the internet is larger than every other country except India, China, and the United States. So that's how pollutive the digital world is. And when we look at this particular graph, we can see how the amount of energy we consume is increasing exponentially, right? From about 5 to 10% of the global energy needs to about 20% of the global energy production will be dedicated to the digital world. So what are some key terms in low carbon computer coding that all of us should take note of? The first thing is called digital decarbonization, where we think of how we can decarbonize what is already there. And the second term is called sustainable digital transformation or sustainable digitization, where we think of how we can build new things in the future that are inherently green. How can we build a new low carbon mobile application? How can we build a low carbon blockchain? So as a corporate, how can all of us play a role in reducing our digital carbon footprint? And this is where the SWOOP framework comes about. It stands for S, which is speed, where we talk about animation speed. W, which is a weight budget for our digital infrastructure. And last but not least, U for user journey, and P for habits. In the interest of time, we're not going to be able to go through all of them in depth, but I just want to impress upon you that things like animation speed that you can see behind me are very critical for your digital carbon footprint. And when we talk about having a page weight budget, it's also very important because we're thinking of how we can set guardrails and prevent overbloat for our digital space. In terms of user journey, it's also the same concept. And I want to touch on P, personal habits, because not all of us here come from a corporate. So it's very important for us to understand as singular individuals, how can we also have that positive impact on the digital environment? And the first thing really is to check your subscriptions. A lot of times our emails are one of the largest heat sinks of carbon footprint, right? When we think of digital sustainability, a singular email with words only is about 3 to 5 grams of carbon dioxide. When you add a picture, it makes it 50 grams of CO2. And most of the emails that we receive today with attachments and videos, those hover about 100 to 250 grams of carbon per email. So by removing unnecessary emails and unsubscribing, we can actually have an outsized impact. The second thing is to send links and not attachments. And when we think of sending of links, we're really here trying to reduce the amount of CO2 we have in terms of unopened attachments. This is something very prevalent in the corporate world where we put a lot of people on CC and BCC. So what happens is that when they don't open the attachment, there's actually wasted carbon in terms of processing the attachment, sending it out, and it being downloaded by the counterparty. And the last thing here really is to optimize your video patterns. And this is a very interesting video behind me. It's called Despacito, one of the world's most watched videos on YouTube. But what's important is at the 5 billion mark, 5 billion view mark, this singular video has already consumed as much energy as 40,000 homes do in America. The whole platform of TikTok was recently shown by The Guardian in the UK to produce as much carbon as the entire country of Greece. So this is not just part of the problem, but this is part of an expanding digital universe that we see. But what's most important when we think of the expanding digital universe is how most of this data is actually unstructured. So you see that up to 90% of this data is unstructured, which means that it cannot be used for AI, it cannot really be used for anything else. And this data is seated there in the cloud, in our data centers, consuming energy, contributing to digital carbon emissions without any possible use case. I'd like to end off today's session with a table that compares things that we do in real life with things that we do in our digital lives. And I want to also compare the carbon footprint between them. So you can see at the very top, if we have a tree, it takes in about 10 kilograms of carbon per year. And if we go for a barbecue, say we celebrate with 7 of our friends today, it's about 18 kilograms of carbon. We do that 5 times a year, it's 90 kilograms, so 9 trees. But now let's talk about something like Google.com. Each time you Google something, it could be a cat meme, it could be how to get to Beyond Expo, that's 0.09 grams of carbon. If you multiply that by the trillions of searches we have in a year, that's about 18 million trees. And we can also look at the impact of things like AI, whereby the training of GPT-3, very early version, was about 8,500 trees worth of carbon. And then Bitcoin mining, 2.2 billion trees worth of carbon. If you average that out over the last 6 years, that means that 13.2 billion trees needs to be planted to offset the carbon impact of Bitcoin mining, which is a purely digital process, right? And 13.2 billion is far more trees that we need to plant than people we have on this entire earth. So how can you be involved? Always ask, ask what the organization is doing, always speak up and always act. So just gonna skip this, and if any of you here has any questions, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on QR code via WeChat. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here, and feel free to visit me if you're in Singapore as well. Thank you very much.